Hi there, and welcome to another life-giving sermon podcast from Resurgent Church. At Resurgent, we endeavor to bring a word that is both encouraging and relevant to your everyday life. So sit back, enjoy the sermon, and for any more information, check out our website at www.resurgentchurch.ca.
My sister was in town with my mother and my brother, and they were en route through Toronto to Ukraine, where my uncle, who's quite a visionary, had set up a seminary and humanitarian center. And he was one of those, we call him the Ukrainian Don Cherry, very, very visionary, big knotted ties and loud suits. But he had a vision for his people, not only in Canada, but in Ukraine. So they were going over there to kind of visit with the people over there. But I could not get them to the airport. They were coming through to Toronto. They stayed overnight. I had to be teaching in London, which is 2 hours from Toronto. My husband was in a very important business meeting in Toronto, so I said, I'll call you all a cab, and you'll all get to the airport, and you have to leave at this time to get there on time. No problem. I'm en route to London, ready to teach, and my sister calls me and says, do you have my passport and visa? And it's like, no, I think that you should have checked that you had it. She didn't have it. It was actually stuck in my car between the seats. But I needed to go teach, so I said, get the other three to the airport, and I will drive home, pick you up. You'll literally hop in the car. We will speed to the airport and join them there. But you better be ready. Well, I turn around, and I go back. The others are at the airport. And she wasn't ready. And I said, Carol, when we get to the airport, you are running out of the car right to the counter. We're not parking. Well, she took her sweet time and she dropped things and she got to the counter and they said, I'm sorry, 20 seconds ago we closed the flight. So I had to go home, book her in through Heathrow, get her hotel, and get her a flight to Frankfurt. Somebody had to pick her up and drive 6 hours across the border. And eventually she got there. But your plans are sometimes fully set in motion and you think it's going to be an easy thing. And it's not an easy thing. But we know that at the end of the road, you're going to land somewhere, someplace. But the question is, where is your place? And the funny thing is, I was with Vanessa in November at my church for their women's conference, and we were worshiping together. And I don't know, Vanessa, if you know this, but she had kind of whispered in passing, sort of like, I'm thinking of doing a feminine fierce day. And it was sort of like, oh, okay, yep, and kind of had a date, February sometime. But I noted that date. There was a seed inside me that I noted that date, and I thought, okay, I have tickets to be in Texas this weekend. There's a big gathering of women from all over the world, and 2,000 of them are in Austin, Texas. But somewhere in my mind, I felt like, I don't think I'm going to be in Texas. I don't think I'm going to be in Texas. And then when she texted that this is the date, I go, yep, that's where I'm supposed to be. And these kind of moments are the moments that we just could not design for ourselves, right? Like where we know that God has a moment for us, but it maybe is not what we had planned. And we have to look at that and make decisions about it. Sometimes we think that he wants to send us somewhere, and we don't want to go. I went to Moody Bible Institute. Have any of you heard of Moody Bible Institute? Okay. At age 16, my father from Edmonton, Alberta said, you're going off to Moody. I don't know why. But I show up there, and every week we had the privilege of hearing from world leaders, the most amazing pastors. George Burwer, who started Operation Mobilization, came from there. Wes Stafford, who founded Compassion International. And so everybody's sitting there like, God, you've got to give me a call, but for me, it was like, give me a call, but I'm not going to Africa. Please don't ask me to go to Africa, because I know that if I say yes, you're going to send me to Africa. And sometimes we want to raise our hand and in the worship, this is the place, this is the moment. But please, Lord, not there. Not to that friend for that conversation. Not back to my marriage. Let me do something where I have a little bit of say in it. And so being on mission comes with great risk, right? And sometimes our two questions to God, my two questions are you able, God? Can you really make this happen? And are you good? Are you good? And so the song today, yes, you are good. But when we ask those two questions and we're coming up lacking on either of them, we will never, never step into the mission in the way that God had intended. And that will be our choice, not his choice. That will always be our choice. Because we know that when we're sent on mission, we weren't the first ones to go. And what I love about God is that he is actually a very missional God. And a word to describe God in theological language is missio Dei. He is a God that is actually on mission himself. And I love that about him. He's actually on the move, very, very missional. And how do we know that? Well, he created the garden, and he put a man and a woman in the garden. And he showed up in their space. It's like, this is a space I've created for you, but I'm sending myself to be with you. What kind of a God does that? And then even after Eve takes the first bite, he had already bought their way out, and he goes like, oh, I really had hoped you wouldn't make that choice, and you can't be in this amazing place, and you need to leave, but I'm going with you. And so he sends himself always with his people, always sending himself, always going ahead of them, saying, I have a plan, I have a place for you, but you always have free will. And I don't know how he works that way, but he's always forever sending himself. And then we know he not only sent himself to that original garden, he put himself and allowed us to put him in our garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, where he totally surrendered his will to the Heavenly Father and said to man, I'll let you do what you think you need to do with me. It will be my choice to take my last breath. But that's how vulnerable I am, and that's how all in I am on my mission. I send myself before I ask you to go. And isn't that amazing that we cannot do for ourselves what we have not experienced from him, and he will always lead the way in the sending. So God sends himself before he sends the church. He is never asking us to do anything that he has not already done. And I think that's a good word for leaders. Leaders go first. We were in Normandy a few years ago, and we were looking at all the graves of the very young men, like 18 years old, 17 years old, 16 years old. And we know that on D-Day, on June 4th, 1944, there were a lot of Canadians that actually are considered the bravest nation to actually help fight along the Allies. And these young men got out of their boats or were dropped from airplanes, went on to the beaches, and if they weren't killed the moment they put their foot in the sand, a lot of them were killed as they scaled the cliffs because Germans were on the other side, right? And we were there watching all the memorials and reading, and what compelled these men to go on mission like that? And it was because they said, our commanders went first. Our commanders went first. And so if you're here today and you're wondering what God has for you and what your place is, and if you're even going to get there, he's gone first, and he's never going to send you or take you anywhere he hasn't cleared the path for you. It doesn't mean it's not going to be dangerous and you're going to have to risk everything. But God is a God who sends himself before he sends the church, and you are the church. He has a history of sending people on mission. He just is not sitting around up there eating, grapes and really nice cheese and drinking fine wine. Just like, okay, what are you guys up to? Like, he is actively on the move, busy all the time. And so in history, we can see since the beginning, and I don't know if this graph is on there or if it made it. I can talk about it, but right from the beginning, I just love this, that he's, okay, like Eve, bad choice, bad day. I can redeem that. I can redeem that. Doesn't disqualify you, and then everything's good. She was actually the first worship leader, if you can believe it, because after her, people started to call on the name of the Lord. So she was fully redeemed in that, mother of all living things. And so he says, okay, Noah, the world has gotten bad again, people making choices that I didn't really want them, but I'm making a covenant with you. I will never again send a flood to destroy the earth. And then Abraham, where you are is good, but I'm pulling you. I'm sending you on mission to another land, and he leaves. And then Moses, I'm taking your people out of Egypt, and I want to take you to the promised land. And then David, you need to establish Jerusalem as the place I'm going to build my tabernacle. And then Jesus, and he's just always moving history forward, which is his story. He's sending people, pulling people on mission. Go, 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 go. And I love that is his story, because it also becomes our story. And when we look at the stories, and I just, when I teach, I'm doing, I teach us a biblical narrative of the women in the Bible, and I'm just pointing out, guys, that, okay, these girls were on fire. They all made life-defining decisions. It just wasn't about the men, right? Like, the men could do nothing without these girls stepping in. And it's complicated, and they had very challenging stories. I mean, Bathsheba, what was all that about? But you know what? Solomon, from his line came Jesus. And so it's all good, and God knows what he's doing. But I just want you to see that mission is not something that was invented by Andrew Hoyes or Vanessa Hoyes as a theme for you. It is the story of God to be on mission, to go out and beyond where you're comfortable all the time. And you know, when God does something, it's always, always all in. You know, one thing as a leader that I found out is that I bleed, and it's painful, and I've had to sacrifice. And God never calls me when I have all the money in the world to start a national organization. I don't have like a cute personal assistant running around doing stuff for me. Like, it's always like, now, God, are you serious? And I try and weigh the cost and say, like 2019 would be a lot better, and I can give this much. And he says, no, when I call you, it's all in, because when I sent myself, it was all in. And isn't this scripture beautiful? He gave up. He gave up. The God of the universe gave up his divine privileges and emptied himself. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human king. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. And sometimes we're so worried about going on mission because of our reputation. What are people going to think? What are people at my work going to think if I'm like a church girl? If I'm an amazing musician, what are they going to think when I go to church and I'm doing worship music? And I was thinking this morning as I was on hold with WestJet for 3 hours that they should be playing praise and worship on the hold lines. But I, in a very vulnerable moment, I've worried about that too, because I have some different competing worlds sometimes. I go into the corporate world. Should I talk about my faith? Do they know I'm a Christian? If they see me preaching, are they going to make decisions? Is that going to make my ministry relevant? And so when you're worried about reputation on mission, look at God's example. Died a criminal's death? God, are you willing to let yourself get labeled like that? Because I'm willing. Because with God, it's always been all in, all in, all in, all in, all in. And we can't measure or give him, I'm going to give you next Tuesday or once a month on a Sunday. We can't do it. He never set it out like that. God's mission is all in. Your mission has to be all in, because this is the model. Jesus Christ is our model. It's not Gandhi. It's not anybody with the name of Trudeau. I mean, if I asked you who are the leaders that you admire, and I ask this a lot when I'm doing leadership training, who are the world leaders that you want to craft your life after and follow? And we're like thinking, covers of Time don't produce any new names for us. I've heard Brian Houston, Bill Hybels. Very few leaders are showing the way for us. But Jesus did. And guess what Jesus said in John 20:21? As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you. And so we know when God sent his Son, he just gave his most precious thing. And Jesus is saying, I love you all. I've always loved you. And I'm sending you in that spirit, in that safe, thriving, healthy, flourishing dance of the Trinity. This is the flourishing relationship you have with me, and I'm sending you to create those environments. But you're going to risk everything. It's going to be hard. You're not going to know what hit you some days, but because you were sent by me, it's safe, because I'm good, and I have power. I have power. And so with that in mind, that is sort of how we go. And if it's to Africa, God bless you. And I actually did end up going to Africa. I went to Ghana for 4 years, and I loved it. I mean, they gave me my own name. I'm a Kuya in Ghanaian, Wednesday born, and I just go like, God, why didn't you send me to Africa earlier? Like, your biggest fears, actually, he kind of says, like, you have no idea that your deepest desires is what you really want. The thing is, though, the act of stepping and taking your place is so unique to you, because we're so big on this, like, what is the will of God for my life? What is the purpose of God? Well, our purpose is to be with him and enjoy him forever. And our purpose is to use our greatest gift in the world. But then what are your gifts? And what is your place? And so it's just like a huge GPS. And I'm telling you, I am a girl, and probably, I don't know, Lori, if you can identify with this, I need GPS. I turn it on even though if I know exactly where I'm going, because I downloaded a male Australian voice. So he tells me where to go, and I just go like, I'm just going to listen to you. You can take me anywhere, and I will follow, right? You know, I will tell. I'll leave that with you. I will leave that with you. And so the GPS, in the bigger sphere, our GPS, our bigger purpose is to enjoy being with God. We have inherent value. Yes, we're talking about mission. We're talking about the do. But we have inherent value just because we're image bearers. And if we could do nothing for God, if we were mute and deaf and blind and on a hospital bed somewhere, we would still be so valuable to him. And so don't make the mistake that you need to get out and do, because I was sharing yesterday that all my doing left me burnt out. And I wasn't really on a purpose-filled mission. I was on a path to performance. And so our bigger mission is something that we're all on. We're all called to be ambassadors. We're all called to reconcile and bring people to Christ and disciple makers. But then there is an individual plan for your mission. It's your path, and you need to walk on it. And then there's a place that only you can take. And so I love this definition of a leader, and we talked about this yesterday. A leader is someone who looks at the world and says, it doesn't have to be this way, and actually does something about it. And so your world is going to look very different than my world. So when I looked at my world, as like, I have to just be honest with you. If you know I'm a grandmother, you're making an assumption about my age. But I wasn't young anymore. When I was young, I was doing all the performance stuff when I was Vanessa's age, and it was all really great and great for the church. But when I really walked into my purpose, my first number had changed, not from a 4, but to the next number. Okay, so... But I looked at my world. I was going on planes and going to conferences in the States and like hearing amazing speakers and coming back and going like, what's happening in our nation? Where's the girl that's going to take up this mantle? I didn't know Vanessa. I didn't know Helen Burns. I didn't know some of the amazing women in Montreal. Where are the women? And one February 8th, 2014, this time of year, I was on a plane home from Chicago. And Priscilla Shire had been there. And it was just an amazing conference. And I tweeted, and I still have that tweet, I'm going back to Canada. Where are the women? And so on my watch, I looked at the world, and I thought, I can't find them. If I can't find them, we're probably having trouble finding ourselves. We're the second largest country in the world. But we're more divided. There's more space between us than any other country. And so there's a problem that we don't know who is leading the way in this nation. We don't know the voices. We don't come together to say, this is on my heart. What's on your heart for Montreal? So a time like yesterday, when we're gathering the leaders in the city, when we're gathering the women, and we're in God's presence and we're hearing fresh vision from him so we can go on mission, are so important. And that's why Gather Women happened. Let's gather the girls in the nation. What is God saying to us? That when crisis happens, and it's happening every single day. We see it socially, politically, even in our churches, that there's a whole generation that have said, I'm not going there anymore. That we rise with a collective voice and say, it's Jesus, it's Jesus, it's Jesus. So a leader is someone who looks at their world and says, it doesn't have to be this way, and does something about it. And that's the mission part, the doing something about it, because leaders know things that others don't. What do you know in your world that the person sitting next to you doesn't? You've been given that special revelation for this time. So what do you know? Leaders speak up and use their voice. When I had a decision to make. I was going to do a master's in conducting, which would have launched me into a whole different world of music and orchestras and stuff, or a master's in leadership, or an MDiv. I was making these decisions. And I was sitting in a class at Briarcrest Seminary in a very small town in Saskatchewan. It's another story how I wanted to go to Dallas Theological Seminary. I ended up there, okay? So, and all of a sudden, my teacher, who's just an amazing mentor, reads from a book, and it's Find Your Voice and Help Others Find Theirs. And I realized, I haven't found my voice. I have not found my voice, and so I set off to find it so I can help others. And I live my life trying to help others find theirs. And then lastly, leaders actually do something about it. There's a moment where it's like, okay, it's go time. We dream, we journal, we watch Oprah, we watch, Me Too. We see all these other people saying such brave things and doing, and we live vicariously through other people's bravery because we're thinking, wrong girl, wrong place, right, wrong time. And I thought that so many times in my life. But you know what? When it's your time, it's go time. And you just have to step into it. And you know what? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. What lessons did you learn? And so I do want to honor a woman today that's in Scripture because I think it's from her story that these lessons are seen, and we can take these to heart and we can open the Scripture for ourselves and say this woman's story is in there for a reason. Judges 4 and 5 tell the story of Deborah. Deborah was one of a line of judges that God sent every time his people slid away from him. So it's the exception and not the norm that we are a faithful people. Most of the time, we're on mission with God, off mission with God, on mission and off mission. So he said, okay, I'm going to send you people that will help kind of keep you on the path. And she was so unique in the biblical narrative because she served as a prophetess, a military leader, a poetess, a wife, a mother, a singer, a political leader, and a judge, all in one. Wow. Her story is such a wonderful illustration of the power that women have to influence society for the good, and I love that. God used her mightily to change the identity of the nation from the people of Israel to the people of God. And the role of the judges at this time was not so much to judge what's right or wrong, but rather to help the people live in right relationship with God and each other. Very pastorly role. I think what Pastors Vanessa and Pastor Andrew do for you is they're helping live in right relationship with God and with each other. And the Bible describes Deborah as holding court under a palm tree. And the palm tree symbolizes strength and grace and fruitfulness and majesty. And in Deborah's case, justice. Because there was a road, a well-traveled road between Bethel and Ramah about 1200 BC. And people traveled on this road and came to Deborah. And she would have been listening to the concerns of her people. Some of them wanted retribution against their neighbors for stolen goods. Some of them were telling her stories that the Canaanites were stealing their children and their harvests and pillaging their land, driving them into the hills and preventing them from having weapons to protect themselves. We can imagine that day after day, listening to her people's complaints, there must have been a fire that started to build in her belly. Talk about fire. And she's like, okay, another story. Are you kidding me? Another day, and nobody's doing everything. 20 years under this tree. She's waiting. Meanwhile, she's building a relationship for her wisdom and her courage. And then one day, God said, go. And Deborah's name means bee. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. And when that bee is like on mission, nothing can stop it, and nothing could stop Deborah. In that day that she awoke and said, it's my time, it's go time. I think at the heart of this model we need to remember, and as the church, is the Trinity. She sat in God's presence as a judge, as a prophetess, hearing from him. And that's where we start. We don't go on mission in our own competence, our own skills, our abilities, but we are sent from this Trinity, this loving relationship with God. And we see a lot of leaders out there, a lot of church leaders out there doing the big, the fascinating, the amazing, the growing. And it's like, God, are you measuring success or are you measuring obedience? And obedience can only come when you sit and you are so in tune to hear God's voice that you're hearing the whispers and not just the loud moments. So just like starting, if that's where you are right now, and like you've been sitting there for 20 years, you know what? It takes as long as it takes. It takes as long as it takes. But you'll know when it's your time to go. And what I love, and I'm going to read from Judges 4 and 5, Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth, okay, there's a name for you. I thought it was bad enough when I married somebody with the name of Ostapchuk. I really wanted to marry Philip Livingston. He was in my grade 12 class at Bitcomp High School because I thought, Philip Livingston, Catherine Livingston, that's my future. No, I marry Ostapchuk, and he's Ukrainian and an insurance salesman, both of things I had said no to. But here's Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth. Guess what Lapidoth means? Okay, Lapidoth in Hebrew means fire starter. He held the flame for her. So she was somebody's person, somebody's woman. All of these amazing things, and I'm sure he had said to her every day, you go. When it's your time, I'm going to be there fanning the flame. So she was a prophet reading from Judges who was judging Israel at that time. She would sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites would go to her for judgment. Not for judgment, but to help, for her wisdom to help them. So a missional position means, first of all, showing up. She had showed up day in and day out for 20 years, day in and day out, showing up to her people. And sometimes we want to launch on mission to a place that we haven't built relationship with. We don't have credibility. We don't have the influence. People are not going to listen to us because we haven't shown up in the places that may seem small and insignificant. If you're a mother at home with a young child in a marriage that's difficult, sometimes he's just saying, show up, show up, show up. Because at some point, things will change. One day, things changed in Judges 4:6. One day, she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, who lived in Kadesh in the land of Naphtali. She said to him, this is what the Lord of Israel commands you. Call out 10,000 warriors from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun at Mount Tabor. And the second thing is, you have a missional proclamation. You need to speak up. There'll be your one day where you say, okay, I need to use my voice. Find my voice. I've taken all this time in this place where I've showed up day after day. Now I need to actually speak it. And you know, it's been challenging for me because I've always done things on behalf of other people. I was a fundraiser for many years for a lot of Christian charities. And in 2006, we invited Anne Graham Lott's, Billy Graham's daughter, to come to Toronto to host a revival. And we had 18,000 people at the Air Canada Centre, but I was the person making that happen. But she came and she left, and she spoke an amazing word, and so many people came to Jesus that day. But I remember reading from Habakkuk, and I'm just going to read you this passage, because I thought I was always somebody else's messenger. And here in Habakkuk it says in chapter 2, verse 2, write my answer on these tablets so that a runner can carry the correct message to others. I thought I was always supposed to be the runner. This vision is for a future time. It describes the end, and it will be fulfilled. If it seems slow in coming, wait patiently, for it will surely take place. It will not be delayed. Is he giving you visions that you need to start speaking about to others? And you're just thinking, well, Pastor Vanessa has the vision. I have no right to speak. If he's giving you a word and it's your time, write it down and take it and speak it. So you not only need to show up, you need to speak up. And then in Judges 4, 7-9, she says how it's going to happen. And she is saying, you need to go and take the victory. And Barak says to her, I'm going to go, but only if you go with me. I think he was honoring her. And she goes, I'll go with you, but you're not going to get the honor, because the Lord's victory over Sisera will be at the hands of a woman. Not only Deborah, but Jael, who after her drove a tent peg into the forehead of Sisera, their enemy. I mean, who does that? But Deborah set the example for future generations. So you need to stand up. And she actually went into battle. She went into battle. And then Judges 4:14, get ready. This is the day that the Lord will give you the victory of Sisera, for the Lord is marching ahead of you. He went and sent himself ahead, and this is go time. And what happens in that moment? It's a stepping out. It's a propelling. You actually have to step out. And usually it's not stepping out into Hawaii. Usually it's stepping into war, into battle, where the first opposition you meet will be somebody with an arrow pointed right at you. And it may be your best friend. People opposed to you are sometimes closest to you because they're scared of who you're becoming, because you're becoming dangerous in God's army. But you have to step out and take your place. You have to step out and take your place. You know, these moments that we step into, that Deborah stepped into, the moment that we stepped into yesterday are Kairos moments. These are the appointed times in the purposes of God. We live our life in Chronos moments. We go like, today I will do this, tomorrow I will go to church, and then I'm going to do that. And these are all series. We can have lots of brave moments, but until you step into the moment, the Kairos moment is when heaven intersects with earth. And it's like, kapow. This is the moment. God's mission is fulfilled in Kairos moments, not Chronos moments. And what happens in a Kairos moment, like when Deborah says, I'm going, I'm no longer, I've heard it, I'm ready, I've seen things have to change, and I'm going. What happens in that moment? Something irreversible. You cannot ever reverse a Kairos moment. Jesus came down and pitched his tent among us, and he was not going to go back until his mission was complete. The mission has to be complete. It's irreversible. Kairos missional moments result in transformational change. Because Deborah stepped out into her moment. No more are we people of Israel. We are people of God. 1 Peter 2:9, but you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him that called you out of darkness into his glorious light. That is the declaration for you today. You cannot reverse that. You have been transformationally changed for eternity. Not just till lunchtime, not just till Monday morning hits. This is for eternity. This is who you are. This is who you are. Oh my goodness, can we live out of that? Kairos missional moments impact generations to come. You know, when you step out, your daughters, your sons, your grandsons, your nieces, your nephews, and you have no idea the people coming behind you that are going to read about your story and say, if she did it, I can. If he did it, I can. And we have to live that. You know what? You are on mission when you take your place and step into your Kairos moment. That's what mission is all about.